Hello, good morning. We were just playing with the technology, making sure everything's running, because when we first started the broadcast, there were no attendees. As much as I like talking, I don't like talking to nobody. So thank you for attending this or listening to this webinar. You've got myself here, Neil Harvey, the Chief Technical Officer, and...
Yeah, and Simon Houghton-Dodd, I'm the Compliance Officer at LBMA.
So, like I say, thank you for joining. This is the Responsible Sourcing webinar in the morning, aimed at all points east of us. So, for those of you way out in Japan, thank you for staying with us. What we want to talk about today, the main focus of today is, when we get the clicker working, and this is the agenda for today, is we're focusing on Responsible Gold Guidance version 8. And the reason we're focusing on that is because we've done a lot of work on it over the last year, and we think it's in a good place. We've had 3 rounds of consultation. We've received a lot of comments, so thank you for all those people who have sent in their comments and points, and hopefully we've addressed the points that have been raised. We have consulted widely on this one because we think this is quite a jump, version 8. But version 7 was more sort of making sure that we were perfectly aligned with the OECD. The version 8 is a big jump because it's involving the environment and sustainability and enhancing the governance of the program. So we think it's quite an important step. We've spoken to refiners, we've spoken to auditors, we've spoken to other associations. So we've been working with the WGC, the ICMM, but I don't want to jump too far ahead here. We've spoken to the OECD, but also the RMI, RJC, well, anybody who will listen to us, really. There were, most of the response was positive, like it should be, because this is the good stuff. The environment and sustainability is something that our industry is very concerned about. So I'm really happy that we've incorporated it into version 8. There have been concerns about the pace of change. We do understand that there is a lot of work involved. The changes to the audits, again, we've dropped ISO. Well, we've proposed that we're dropping ISO so that we can focus the auditing on one single scheme. But also making sure that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, downstream, upstream. We've got standardized documentation for the implementation of version 8. With that, that's what we want to talk about. Simon's now going to go into a bit of detail.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. As Neil's briefly explained, the principal changes to version 8 are the expansion in scope to include environment, social, and enhanced emphasis on governance. It always seemed a bit strange that we had a responsible sourcing program that didn't really address major issues around sustainability in terms of environment. So that was one key area that we were keen to address as we've moved into this version. It aligns our program further with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I think that's something that we'll be working on as we go through this year and future. It's enhanced the producer interface. So we wanted to increase the interaction between refiners and producers of all sorts and sizes, hence our extensive consultation with ICMM and World Gold Council, but also with some of the ASM people as well. There was the proposal to remove ISO-style audits. I'll go through that in a bit more detail later on as to the reasons behind it and the outcomes of the consultation piece. We've updated the refiners toolkit to reflect the requests from producers and refiners that everybody was being asked the same question. When we spoke to producers initially back probably around April, May time this year, one of their key concerns was that by increasing the scope, they might get 80% of the questions would be the same from all 68 gold refineries, but then the last 20% would vary differently from refiner to refiner. So it was the request from producers to standardize that. But then also from refiners, it was, well, what is it we should be looking for? So by incorporating the ESG, environment, social, and governance into the toolkit, then we would hope that that helps reduce the additional burden for everybody. We've also updated the supporting document. So for the third-party audit guidance, then this has allowed us to slim the document down considerably. And we've also launched a management guidance document, which is a new document primarily aimed at refiners, but also applicable to everybody that has an interest in our responsible sourcing program.
Yeah. I think the management guidance sort of pulls everything together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Into one spot, and it really sort of pulls everything together.
Yeah. So a bit more detail on what we've changed and why we've changed. So we've already spoken about this. We're encouraging refiners to engage with producers, defining minimum requirements along the supply chain. It's important to say here that we are not seeking to impose Western European environmental or health and safety rules and regulations across the globe. What the guidance actually says is that you should comply with the legislation that is in force in the jurisdiction in which you operate.
That's not in any way implying that other jurisdictions have lesser.
No, they have different focuses. In some places you have to send all the waste to landfill. In other places you can't send it. So we've not set to impose our standards. We are saying that you have to require with the law in which the country or jurisdiction you operate. Again, this was key feedback from the consultation phase, that we didn't want to put in place things that ASM miners would not be able to do because they were only applicable to large-scale miners. So produce an annual company report or something like that. We're not asking for that. We are, however, asking you to look at the environmental impact on supply chains. So we're talking around water use here, energy use, etc. So biodiversity and things like that. So again, it's aligned with the new principles and codes that are coming out from World Gold Council and ICMM. So we're complementing what they're asking for, not contradicting it. And one item that actually was actually raised by the OECD during the alignment assessment was, could we look at the economic benefit our program has across supply chains? So how could we measure all of that? In this first round of audits, and in 2019 being the year of implementation, it may be that people, all they can do is get an estimate of people working directly in the supply chain. But at least then, when we've got all the reports in, we'll be able to say, in the good delivery supply chain, there are X 100,000 people directly employed. As we move on forwards over the next 2 or 3 years, maybe we can get more sophisticated measures in place. But at the beginning, we should be able to do that.
But is that going to be auditable?
It will be, because you'll have had to have got that information from your producers. So as I say, large-scale mining organizations, in mid-tier ones, will have annual reports where they'll talk about employees, etc., and things like that. For the ASM side of things, then you'll be able to get an estimate, particularly if you're going down through the RAGS forum route, a number of miners and people that are involved in working individual pits.
So I think we need to emphasize that this is work that's already being done.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I think that was, again, key feedback from people. When we first mentioned this at the ICMM meeting with producers and refiners, everyone thought, we won't be able to do this. When we explained the content and the changes, they went, well, we're doing that already. And we went, yeah, I know. What we want to do is to just recognize the good work that you're doing. So again, talking about the policies and procedures that refiners tend to have in place. So we don't say you have to have an ISO 14000 system. We say you need to have a system that addresses environmental issues. For example, it could be 14,000.
Yeah. So during your responsible gold audit, we're not asking the auditor to audit you against ISO 14000.
No.
The question is, do you have an ISO 14000 certification or equivalent?
Yeah, exactly.
So just provide the evidence that they're not actually going to do that.
How do you comply with your environmental legislation requirements?
Yeah.
Etc. So why is it important? Probably take one step back. Neil's already mentioned the changes. We went from version 6 to version 7 this time last year. That was important because by getting version 7 recognized as being 100% aligned with OECD, it should, and I'll emphasize should because it hasn't been yet, be recognized by the EU as complying with the impending EU conflict minerals legislation. And that means you would only have to undergo one audit because you would be deemed as being in compliance with EU regulation by having had an LBMA audit. So that was why we had to get version 7 out quite quickly last year. And it didn't allow us to do a consultation that we've done this year over 6-8 months, where we've talked to a wide range of stakeholders about the inclusion of environment, social and governance issues.
So hopefully the EU will be happy with what we've done.
I mean,
but let's not forget about Brexit.
Yes.
I mean, so hopefully if the EU are happy, sometime in the future the UK will be happy as well.
Well, coincidentally, we have a meeting with a representative of the British government who's talking to us about post-EU conflict minerals legislation in the UK. So we'll see how that goes later on today. And again, it's to recognise it's not someone else's problem. It is all about collaboration. So we have increased our interaction with people from downstream this year as well, and other stakeholders. So we recognise that one of us, or one sector of the supply chain, can't solve everything, and it's taking small steps in the right direction and improving activities as we go forward. I can't promise when we're talking about the pace of change that this will be the last major change to our responsible sourcing program, but I think it's time now that we consolidate on what we've got. We've come a long way since 2012. We are 100% aligned with the OECD. We've always gone beyond Dodd-Frank in terms of scope and geographic and in content. I think now by having the ESG in, we've plugged the one remaining obvious gap. So I think going forwards, it will be more of a finessing of the wording and the content rather than making a major change like we have this time. And one of the reasons that we're probably emphasizing this is that there have been studies, academic studies by Harvard University and other people, where they can clearly demonstrate economic benefits to organizations whose short-term actions support their long-term future. So if you have objectives from 2025, what you're doing now and over the next 3 months should be aimed to going towards those. So, and that will add tangible benefits to your business and those along the supply chain. And I suppose to sum up, it is about doing the right thing now. So we've talked about this, but to go into it in a bit more detail, we have spent a long time talking to the World Gold Council and ICMM because I mentioned they are actually introducing codes of conduct and responsible mining principles that their members will have to adhere to. And we wanted to make sure that we supported that by, well, we fed back our comments into theirs, but also when we've looked at the content of their codes of conduct and practices, we've included that within our process. The Refiner's Toolkit, we've updated that, and the first 3 questions really sort of say, are you a member of the World Gold Council or ICMM? Have you signed up to their principles? Are you audited against them? If your supplier or producer says yes to all of those, then they're 80% of the way through to demonstrating the fact that they are a responsible producer. So you would have to do very little additional due diligence on a certain amount of supply chain.
And that's not just limited to the ICMM or the UGC.
No.
We've included things like IRMA.
Yep.
It is included in there.
Yeah, and Canadian government standards as well.
Trade,
yeah.
fair mind.
Yeah.
And anything that you can use to demonstrate that you're asking the right questions and you're getting the right information from the producers.
Yeah, and as we said, we've set out a medium and large scale refiner's self-assessment form, but also we've done a second one for ASM, which is basically a slimmed down version of the Responsible Artisanal Gold Solutions checklist that they set up. We helped them draft that, so what we've done, we've edited it down, we've referenced their website and their documentation on the form, and also it is aligned with the craft standard as well. So we want to make sure that all people in the good delivery supply chain, whether you be a producer, an NGO, a downstream user, or an auditor, recognize that the LBMA supports responsible artisanal gold production. and we have had one success story. If you go on to plug it, there is a film, The Journey of Gold, which actually documents how a good delivery refiner has processed artisanal gold from Eastern DRC this year, and is actually on sale currently in the United States in High Streets.
Yeah, so a big shout out to the ARM and the work that they did, the responsible mining people.
Yeah, and USAID, etc., and everybody involved in that project. Yeah. So we spoke at the very beginning about the removal of ISO-style audits. We've done a review of the reports produced by ISO over the last 18 months, and also then cross-check that against geographical spread of auditors, the number of refiners that use ISA E3000 versus ISO. Roughly 70% of refiners currently use ISA E3000. When we've looked at the audit reports, then the amount of information and the granularity that you get from an ISA E3000 engagement is vastly superior to that that's been produced by ISO audits over the same period. Now, the benefit of that means that we have to go back to refiners and auditors with much less frequency when it's been an ISA E3000 than we have over an ISO, because we can only look at that audit report and the associating information we get from that to make an informed decision on whether we issue a certificate. So if we have a very brief report saying audited step 1, yes, audited step 2, yes, we can't make a decision on that, and we will go back to people. But whereas if a refiner in their management report has written out, this is in detail how we do this, these are the improvement activities we've done over the last year, then it makes our decision-making process a lot easier.
Oh yeah, the more information we get, our life's easier. But also, I think for transparency reasons, the more information you can share, and we're not talking about economically sensitive information, any information that you can share in your audit reports, and certainly the public-facing reports, the better.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, the audits being performed in 2019 will be the last year when ISO audits are accepted by LBMA. So for your audit that covers your current financial year, you can continue to do an ISO audit, but from the financial year that starts on or after the 1st of January 2019, in 15 months' time, you will have to go through an ISA 3000.
And I think we need to stress, it shouldn't be more work for the refinery.
No.
You're already doing the work.
Yep.
The auditor is already doing the work. Doesn't matter what standards it is, the work's already being done. So it shouldn't be more of a burden on the refinery.
No, it shouldn't be. And going on to the auditing side of things, then we currently have 32 auditors that are approved to provide the assurance engagements. We have already had, I think it's 4 current ISO auditors say they will transfer across to doing ISA 3000 audits assessments from 2020. And looking already at it, then we still will maintain a worldwide geographical reach. But if your preferred auditor does not have a local office that is on our approved suppliers list, you can still use them, but your engagement will have to be signed off by their office that is on our approved auditors list. So you can't use one that isn't on the approved list. So, for example, if it's one of the big 4 and they have an office in Japan, but their main registered office is in Germany, you can use the Japan local office, but it has to be signed off by the German office. And we've put that provision in place because we recognize that being able to undergo audits in your local language is equally as important and will be much more efficient and productive as well.
Okay.
So looking on at the support documentation, we mentioned that we have simplified the third-party audit guidance. So going forwards, we will no longer have individual guidance documents for each metal: gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. We have one consolidated document that talks about responsible sourcing program audits. It sets out the duration, the maximum duration for multi-metal audits, and it also clarifies the requirements that we are asking auditors to adopt a risk-based approach to that. I won't say any more on that because I know Neil will cover that very quickly. So simplified, it's taken, I think, the document down from 80 odd pages down to 23. It defines multi-metal audits, and it also clarifies that we are asking for risk-based auditing. The new document.
Yeah, so obviously the audit guidance now focuses on auditors.
Yes.
And the audit.
Yep. It's currently not up on our website because you still need the existing ones to do an audit next year.
Because of the ISO.
Yeah. The new document that will be coming up on our website is the management guidance document. I've said it is primarily aimed at refineries, but it is applicable to all parties engaged in our responsible sourcing program in any way. It's not meant to be audited. It's not written as an additional standard of which against auditors can audit a refinery. It is mainly there to define the aims, objectives, and the scope of our responsible sourcing program and what the key principles are supporting that program. So it's there as a bit of background information, if you like, so that this is, if I read this first, I can understand what the LBMA is, then I can move on to the actual guidance, and then if I need to, I can look at what the audit guidance is after that.
Yeah, I think it should be your first stop.
Yeah, yeah. And another reason why it probably can't be audited is it sets out our incident management process, so everybody knows if there is, and our whistleblowing policy. So if anyone in our program wants to raise a concern, has heard market intelligence, or has seen an NGO report, you can raise that via our whistleblowing policy that is now in the management guidance, and you can see how the LBMA will address any incident going forward. So it's quite transparent as to what we would be doing and how we would go about it. And again, as I said, it just talks about the type of information relating to ESG issues that we're looking at. The one thing that we have moved and is there is we've taken the template for a refiner's compliance report out of the third-party auditor guidance and put it into the management guidance because it sits there, because it is for the refiner to use. It's not really an auditor tool, it's a refiner's tool. So we've moved it to where it should more logically sit.
Yep. Okay. Now, this slide might look a bit out of place, and until late yesterday, it wasn't even in this presentation. But when we did a dummy run of this presentation, an audience member sort of pointed out, maybe we should actually share with this audience what the LBMA does internally in terms of risk assessment of the refiner's business model, shall we say. This appeared first in our annual review last year, or this year. This year. And it's just to share with you what we're thinking. When we look at audit reports, when Simon reviews the audit reports, there's certain things that he's looking for that sort of informs him of the risk level of how a refinery is operating. So in case you haven't seen this, just to go through it quickly, if you are doing over 100 tons of gold a year, for example, you're at a higher risk than somebody who's doing the minimum, the 10 tons a year. What type of material are you taking in? And if you're taking in ASM material, then there's probably a little bit more work that you have to do. That's why we have the craft standard. Yep. What type of businesses? Are you just converting London Good Delivery bars, or are you taking large-scale mining material? Also, where are you getting from? If you're just a refinery getting it from the mine, and that's your mine, part of your operation in one country, then that's a simple model, and it's a low risk. But if you're taking from all over the world, the risk is higher. Market intelligence. This is an interesting one. We have a network of people who bring issues to our attention, and obviously the gold industry attracts a lot of negative press, and we have to follow up on that. And if one particular institution is getting a lot of negative press, then we have to take cognizance of that. Also, where are you operating? And this is based on the country risk assessment, which is based on Heidelberg, it's based on Dodd-Frank, it's based on whole load of things that the OECD is developing a tool so that you can do your own country risk assessment, but also the business model. And often a lot of risky behavior is related to how you operate as a business. So are you self-financed? Are you relying on shareholders? Are you relying on stakeholders? Are you part of an industrial conglomerate? So there's various things about how you finance, which dictates how you run your business. So that obviously affects your risk assessment. So we just wanted to share with you how the LBMA looks at audit reports in terms of a risk rating. And this is the tool that we use.
So we mentioned multi-metal audits a couple of minutes ago, and we have defined the maximum duration that a multi-metal audit should take. So if you are doing gold currently and you expand your scope to gold and silver from next year, then if your previous audit was 4 days long, it should be 5 days long, so an extra 25% in length. And then if you do all 4 metals, then it will be 50%. So it will go from a 4-day audit to a 6-day audit. The reason why it's only gone up by a smaller percentage than you might imagine is that the management systems will be common across all metals, but then there will be individual metal-specific supply chains that need to be interrogated by the auditors. So that's the reason why it doesn't double and then quadruple in length.
Can we say at this point that we are working with the LPPM on the platinum and palladium, because obviously the LPPM looks after the platinum and palladium good delivery list. So we are working closely with them on the platinum and palladium.
Yes. And then prior to the audit commencing, the refiner and auditor should agree the scope of the audit, the duration, we've already said what we would cap it at, and the reporting structure prior to the engagement. So if you're doing all 4 metals, are you going to do one report, or are you going to do that's for yourselves and the auditor to agree prior to the scope. And then the non-conformances should be raised either against a management system, if it's common across all metals, or the individual metal concerned, if it is particularly on one supply chain for gold out of Ghana or something. The benefits of this is, as we said, it minimizes the additional resources required, but it maintains the integrity of the system. And the other also benefit is it allows the possibility, or increases the possibility of top-up audits. If you remember, we stopped automatically cross-recognizing RMI and RJC audits a couple of years ago, and so we introduced this top-up audit principle, so that you would do the 80% of the audit that's common between both of us, and then you would carry on and top up with the additional LBMA requirements on that additional time spent auditing the other metals.
And that's always been the case with the RJC, for example, isn't it? They've always had things that you had to do extra over and above our audit, but hopefully we've removed most of those now.
A bit on the audit reports. I think some of you may well have seen this slide before, but I think it's worth repeating for people that are new to an LBMA webinar. We need the reports to reflect what the activities were that were reviewed, and with enough detail to understand the decision-making process as to why an auditor raised a non-conformance or decided that it didn't need to be a non-conformance raised. But more importantly, it is a refinery's opportunity to demonstrate their continuous improvement activities. We've done this amount of training. We've increased our engagement with producers. We've done these site visits, and it's your chance to show off, if you like, and to demonstrate to us. And if you remember rightly, your reports will be published on our website, so it's your chance to demonstrate to downstream users and NGOs that actually this is what we are doing in this space going forwards. Ultimately, the report is our way of making a decision about issuing you a certificate.
Yeah. And we really encourage best practice. And if there is best practice, we will advertise that. We will share that. We will shout it from the rooftops. This refinery is doing a fantastic job. Or if it's anonymous, we can say this is what the best refineries are doing in this space.
The next point is in bold, because it's something that was raised by the OECD, and it's something that I feel very strongly about myself. is that standardized word templates are only there for guidance. If the space that is available to write on isn't big enough, then you can expand that space and put more information in. Just because it allows you to put 300 characters in does not mean your response has to be limited to 300 characters. It's there to show you what the content should be. So step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not there to tell you what to write. It's just to say, this is the structure the document should look like. That said, on the sort of like the enforcement side of things, then we reserve the right to shadow audits. And this would be informed to the auditor and the refinery in advance. If we have concerns about an audit report or, as Neil talked about, market intelligence from a high-risk refinery, we have the right to request the full audit pack to see absolutely everything the auditor did as part of that assessment. And also then, we have last year removed 3 auditors, I think, from our approved auditor list, and we can remove all individual auditors now as well. So there is that if they're not actively engaged or participating in the program.
Yeah, so we don't want to sound too negative here, because everything we're doing here is enhancing the program, which means that if you're abiding by the program or adhering to the program, then it's good for you as well.
Yeah, and I think that if you take that, the positive side of that is if you give us all of this information up front as part of your audit report, we can head off lots of inquiries from NGOs without them coming to you or us having to go back to you.
Which we do.
Yeah, frequently.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay, we're now going to move on onto the most important slide of this entire presentation. So please pay attention now.
Yeah. So as Neil says, this is quite key. So 2019 is the implementation year. So Responsible Gold Guidance version 8 will come into force on the 1st of January 2019. The key point on this slide is the very first one. Refiners will not be penalized if you make genuine efforts to comply with the additional requirements of version 8 over and above version 7.
I think good faith is
good faith. Yeah. You should conduct an early gap analysis between what you do and what you currently report in your responsible sourcing practice and the requirements against new version 8. Prioritize the high risk and the complex issues first, and gradually throughout the year close out those gaps in your systems. So we are not expecting people to be 100% in compliance on the 1st of January, but we are expecting you to move and close out those gaps as you go through the year. When we say genuine efforts, we mean starting early. We do not mean suddenly doing a mad rush from the 1st of November to the end of December. So engage with auditors as early as possible to sort out the scope of the audits, what they can help you with. But if you have any issues, then please speak to Neil or myself as early as possible, because our role in this is, yes, it is to ultimately ensure compliance with the system, but in this implementation year, it's to help you through the process. So if you have any concerns, any questions, you don't understand what it is that we're asking for, please speak to us as early as possible.
Yep. Okay, so having said all that, we think we're in a good place with version 8. We think it's the right thing to do. We understand that it is a major change, but we think it is the last major change for a while. We certainly believe that, but that doesn't mean we just stop. It doesn't mean we rest on our laurels. We will tweak, we will finesse, but more importantly, Simon mentioned it earlier about collaboration, is that we've realized since we've been running this program that we can share a lot, we can involve a lot more people, whether it's upstream. So this has definitely been the year of engaging the upstream, work with the ICMM and WGC, understanding where the conflict-free standard sits, all the work that the mines are doing, how do we make sure that the refinery gets the comfort that they are taking material from a reputable upstream source. Best practice we mentioned earlier, we have to be progressive here, we have to be leading the way. We do accept that you can't standardize everything. Most people are unique. There might be extra questions, there might be clarification. Continue to engage with ASM. It's a legitimate source if it's done responsibly, and we want to encourage refineries to engage where they can. But also understanding that as much we can do all this good work, but if the downstream doesn't understand what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to do, then we're missing a big part of what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So we are engaging with the electronics, automotive, and all the people, but critically the financial sector. The LBMA is a trade association. Most of our members are in the financial sector. Getting them engaged in the process, getting them asking the right questions. Yes, it is more work for us, but we don't mind.
And I suppose it's just to demonstrate that it's not always refineries that we're asking things to. So the traders have had to sign up to the Precious Metals Code and trade reporting and things like that as well.
Yeah, and there will be bullion bank reporting against their responsible processes.
Yeah.
And last but not least is we will talk to anybody who listens. And it's not coincidence that we're speaking to the UK government after we finish this call. We'll speak to anybody who we need to speak to. Yeah. We're engaging in Africa. We're engaging with anybody who's trying to do the right thing.
Yep.
And with that, I think it's anything further to say?
No.
We can move on to questions, and we ask the lovely lady over here, do we have any nice questions?
Yes, we have received quite a few, so I don't think we'll have time to go through all of them, unfortunately, but we can do our best, and with those we don't have time for, I'm sure we can get to afterwards over email.
Okay.
So just firstly, you mentioned you have closer collaboration with LBMA and organisations like ICMM. Does that mean you would be moving towards automatic cross-recognition for audits in the responsible sourcing programme, or would that be something you would consider in the future?
Simple answer is the lessons we've learned since 2012 is cross-recognition was something that was required at the time. We've now matured and we've now realised that all of this good work, whilst we totally have faith in the organisations doing this good work, we need to have ultimate line of sight of what is happening in our part of the supply chain.
Yeah, I think we were quite deliberate in the language you use, where we say membership of those organisations supports your responsible sourcing practices, but refiners would still have to do additional due diligence on high-risk supply chains. Mm-hmm. But it goes a long way to supporting it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And next, how can auditors looking to provide ISE assurance services become part of the approved auditors list?
Email me and ask me. Is the short answer.
Yeah,
but you then have to demonstrate that you're qualified, etc. But yeah, the first step would be to email us and register your interest in conversion.
And what kind of documentation would you be looking for?
The same as we do for a normal auditor application, so CVs, experience, the names of auditors.
Okay, and for those already registered for ISO, is there a conversion process that they would need to go through if they're looking to also provide ISE?
It's exactly that same process. So either for a new auditor or for conversion, initially email us registering your intent. Similarly, if you want to do platinum and palladium, if you just currently are doing register for gold and silver, if you want to do all four, drop us an email stating your desire to move across, and then we'll get back to you and we'll send you, this is the information that we need. But it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, because that's important. Because even if you're just a platinum and palladium refinery, the responsible platinum and palladium guidance references the fact that you have to use an LBMA approved auditor.
Yes.
Okay, great. Just in terms of the implementation, the important slide that we looked at referenced RGG version 8. Would you just be able to clarify and maybe repeat those key dates for implementation and the work required for those undertaking a multi-metal audit?
Yeah, so if you think then a multi-metal audit, we introduced silver as a voluntary audit last year, but from the 1st of January 2019, it becomes a mandatory requirement. So if you do gold and silver, your next audit would have to be a mandatory multi-metal audit against gold and silver. If you are a gold refiner only and you want to transition from version 7 to version 8, it is for your financial reporting period starting on or after the 1st of January 2019 when version 8 starts to apply. Similarly for platinum and palladium, it is the 1st of January 2019, that is their implementation year as well.
And we are already receiving reports from refineries who are doing all four metals, audit reports against all four metals.
Yeah.
So there were some concerns about how that multi-metal report would look, but I think the early adopters are making it quite clear that it can be still quite a simple system, one report for review.
And we've already had 7 combined gold and silver audits this year as voluntary ones, and have issued some responsible silver certificates as well already.
Mm-hmm.
So when does the management guidance become available or apply, and does it impose further requirements on refiners and auditors, or is it purely there for further information?
It doesn't impose any additional requirements. It is there for information. So it's not meant to be part of the audit. It is there for guidance. As Neil said, it should be your first port of call when you are saying, oh, I need to adopt version 8. Go and look at that, because that sets out, this is the reason why we're going down there, a bit of a narrative about why ESG is important, what we're looking at covering, etc. So it's not meant to be an auditor come in with this and say, sorry, that's not going to work, is it? With a copy of the guidance document in their hand and say, right, I'm auditing you against that. You get audited against version 8, and the guidance, the management guidance, is there to help you support that implementation process. It will be available probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks on our website.
Yeah, it is out for limited consultation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And then I think this will be time for just one more. So will the silver audits and the ESG requirements that are being implemented across the responsible sourcing program, do you think refiners should be expecting similar large requirements coming over on an annual basis, or is this the biggest change that the responsible sourcing program will see for the next year?
And unless there's something obvious that we're missing, I can't see any sort of major changes in the short term.
No,
or even medium term.
No. The obvious change is that we will need to align silver, platinum, and palladium with version 8 of the gold guidance. But in terms of developing the program anymore, as Neil says, I think unless new legislation comes out that we haven't foreseen, then I don't think there will be big changes like this.
Okay. Great. That's everything.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening. If you do have further questions, please send them through to us. If you want to listen to this again, we are performing for the Western Hemisphere at 3 o'clock.
3:30.
3:30 this afternoon. But yeah, please, thank you for listening. We're really happy with the turnout to see so many of you listening.
And also there will be a recording of one or other, whichever is the least worst or the best, whichever way you look at it, will be available on the website probably in the next week.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Yep. Thank you.